In the 10th century, long before guns existed, soldiers learned the art of war with bows. Every morning began with training, discipline, and the cold silence of a battlefield waiting. Experienced warriors taught young soldiers how to hold the bow. A wrong grip meant a weak shot, and in battle a weak shot could cost a life. Every arrow was precious. Soldiers carried them carefully in leather quivers. Losing arrows meant losing the chance to defend yourself when enemies approached. Training fields were filled with straw targets. Soldiers shot hundreds of arrows every day, repeating the same movement until it became instinct. The moment of release was everything. A calm breath, steady hands, and the arrow would fly through the air like a silent hunter. When an arrow struck the center of the target, the warriors knew the soldier was ready. Accuracy meant survival in real battles. On the battlefield, archers did not shoot alone. Entire lines of soldiers released arrows together, creating a deadly rain falling onto the enemy. From a distance, it looked like the sky itself was attacking. Hundreds of arrows darkened the air before crashing down upon enemy shields. Speed was just as important as accuracy. Skilled archers could shoot arrow after arrow in seconds, keeping constant pressure on the enemy. High ground gave archers a powerful advantage. Shooting from hills allowed arrows to travel farther and strike enemies hiding behind shields. Arrowheads were carefully sharpened before battle. Iron tips could pierce leather armor and sometimes even break through weaker metal protection. After battles or long training days, soldiers repaired arrows near the fire. Broken shafts were replaced because every arrow mattered. Some soldiers even crafted their own arrows. Straight wood, feathers for balance, and a sharp iron tip turned simple materials into deadly weapons. Training never stopped because of weather, rain, wind, or snow. Soldiers had to learn how to shoot in every condition. In battle, archers often hid behind shields while shooting. Protection was necessary because enemy arrows could arrive just as quickly. When the battle began, archers were usually the first to attack, weakening enemy ranks before swords and spears met. A single signal from the commander was enough. Hundreds of bows were raised, and the battlefield held its breath. Then the sky filled with arrows again, flying fast and silent toward soldiers waiting below. Shields lifted, armor rattled, and the rain of arrows crashed against the enemy line, beginning the chaos of battle. After the first rain of arrows, archers quickly reached for new ones. A good soldier never wasted time. Every second decided whether the enemy advanced or fell. Training made their movements fast and automatic. Arrow to string, draw the bow, aim, release. The same motion repeated thousands of times during endless practice. Commanders shouted orders across the battlefield. Archers had to listen carefully, because shooting too early or too late could break the entire formation. As enemy soldiers advanced, archers aimed at the front lines, trying to slow them before they reached sword fighting distance. Many arrows struck shields and armor, but even that helped. The noise, the fear, and the constant pressure exhausted the enemy soldiers. Experienced archers sometimes chose a single target. One calm breath, steady hands, and the arrow could find a gap between armor. The arrow flew silently through the chaos of shouting men, clashing shields, and pounding footsteps. When the enemy came too close, archers slowly stepped back, continuing to shoot while retreating behind their own soldiers. Spearmen and shield warriors moved forward, protecting the archers. Each group depended on the other to survive the battle. From behind their lines, archers continued shooting over the heads of their own warriors, sending arrows deep into enemy ranks. Soon many quivers began to empty. Soldiers counted their arrows carefully because running out during battle could mean certain death. Some archers even picked arrows from the ground and shot them again, if they were still strong enough. Wind could change everything. A strong gust could push arrows away from their targets, forcing archers to adjust their aim. Skilled warriors learned to shoot slightly higher, letting gravity guide the arrow down toward the enemy. For young soldiers, the first real battle was terrifying. Their hands shook as they tried to remember the training. Beside them stood experienced archers who had fought many battles and moved with calm precision. Sometimes arrows landed in the dirt, but even missed shots forced enemies to raise shields and slow their advance. Commanders often ordered archers to move along the battlefield, attacking the enemy from different directions. From higher ground, arrows traveled farther and struck with more force. Enemies climbing a hill became easy targets, and many battles were decided by who controlled the high ground. As the sun slowly moved across the sky, the battle continued with arrows flying again and again. Archers grew tired, their arms heavy from pulling bowstrings for hours. After hours of fighting, many archers began to realize their quivers were almost empty. The arrows that once filled them were now scattered across the battlefield, broken, lost, or buried in shields and armor. Every remaining arrow suddenly became incredibly valuable. Soldiers carefully counted what they had left, knowing that soon they might have to fight without their bows. Some archers slowed their shooting, choosing their targets more carefully than before. Instead of firing into the crowd, they waited for the perfect moment. In those final shots, skill mattered more than ever, because each arrow could decide whether the enemy continued advancing or finally stopped. With only a few arrows remaining, every movement became slower and more careful. The archer lifted his bow, feeling the familiar tension in the string as he pulled it back. His arms were tired after hours of shooting, but training forced him to stay steady. Around him the battlefield roared with no shouting warriors, clashing shields, and distant cries, but in that moment he focused only on his target. One enemy soldier moved between the lines, exposed for a brief second. The archer took a breath, held the bow perfectly still, and released the arrow, hoping this final shot would strike true. Soon the distance between armies disappeared. Enemy warriors pushed forward with shields and spears, closing the space that archers needed to fight. Bows were powerful from far away, but at close range they became difficult to use. Many archers realized the battle was changing. The sky no longer filled with arrows. Instead, the clash of steel grew louder. Warriors collided face to face, shields slamming together. Archers slowly stepped backward, searching for space to fire again. But many understood that the moment for arrows was ending. Now the battle belonged to swords, axes, and raw strength. Although they were known for their bows, archers were still warriors. When enemies came too close, they could not simply run away. Many carried small swords, knives, or axes for this exact moment. One archer quickly placed his bow across his back and drew a short blade from his belt. His hands were still shaking from shooting arrows, but now he had to fight like every other soldier. The battlefield had become chaotic and dangerous. In seconds, a calm archer could turn into a desperate fighter, defending himself among the shouting men around him. Archers joined the main line of warriors, standing shoulder to shoulder with spearmen and shield bearers. Even though their bows were their main weapons, they had trained for moments like this. Battles in the 10th century rarely went exactly as planned. Lines broke, soldiers moved, and chaos took over. In that confusion, every warrior had to adapt. The archers who once stood quietly behind the army now found themselves in the middle of the fight, pushing back enemies and protecting their comrades as best they could. The battlefield was a storm of movement and sound. Dust filled the air, shields slammed together, and the ground shook under hundreds of running feet. Somewhere above, a few last arrows still flew through the air, but most fighting now happened face to face. Warriors shouted orders, cries of fear mixed with sounds of courage. For many soldiers, the world shrank to only a few meters around them, the enemy in front, the friend beside them, and the desperate struggle to survive the chaos. As evening approached, the fighting slowly weakened. Both sides were exhausted after hours of battle. After battle, soldiers searched the ground for arrows that could still be used. Many arrows were broken during the fight. Every saved arrow meant survival in the next battle. They returned slowly to their camp. Night fell, and fires lit the dark camp. When the battle finally slowed, many soldiers walked carefully across the battlefield searching for arrows. In the 10th century, arrows were valuable and difficult to replace. Warriors looked through the grass, the mud, and even between fallen shields to recover any arrows that were still usable. Some were broken, some bent, but others were perfectly fine. Every recovered arrow meant one more chance to fight in the next battle. For archers, this work was almost as important as the battle itself. Without arrows, even the strongest became useless. Many arrows were destroyed during the fight. Some had shattered against shields. Others had snapped when they struck armor or rocks on the ground. Soldiers picked them up and examined them carefully. A broken shaft could sometimes be repaired, but many arrows were simply too damaged to use again. Seeing hundreds of broken arrows scattered across the field showed just how intense the battle had been. Hours earlier, those arrows had filled the sky, flying silently through the air. Now they lay still in the dirt, silent witnesses to the fight that had taken place. A soldier slowly filled his quiver with the arrows he had recovered. Some were scratched, some dirty, but they could still fly. In a time when armies traveled long distances and supplies were limited, warriors could not afford to waste anything. Arrows were carried from battle to battle, repaired again and again, until they finally broke completely. Each arrow represented time, work and survival. For the archer, a full quiver meant confidence. An empty one meant danger. One simple arrow, crafted by hand, could travel across the sky and change the fate of warriors. And in the 10th century, long before guns and cannons, the silent flight of an arrow was one of the most powerful forces on the battlefield.